I'm an ex-recruiter and I've interviewed thousands of candidates, and the ones who stood out weren't the smartest. They simply understood human psychology better than the rest. Most people think hiring is a logical process, but it's not. Like it or not, it's emotional, it's instinctive, it's biased, and once you understand the psychology behind it, you can land almost any job you want, even ahead of people that look more qualified on paper. Let me show you exactly how it works. So I spent over a decade recruiting across 50 different countries, and I can tell you this. I've seen brilliant people get rejected and average candidates get offers they had no business getting. And the difference wasn't skill. It wasn't experience, it wasn't even the resume. It was how they made the interviewer feel. And after screening thousands of profiles and sitting in hundreds of interviews, I realized hiring is about 80% psychology and only 20% on skills and experience. And once I understood that, I could predict almost instantly who would get hired and who wouldn't. So let me walk you through the psychological principles the best candidates use. So principle number one is something called cognitive ease. And this one alone puts you ahead of most job seekers. Cognitive ease basically means people choose what feels easy, and that applies massively to hiring. Recruiters and hiring managers don't gravitate towards the most impressive candidate. They often gravitate towards those who are easier to deal with. Now, that doesn't mean listing that as a skill in your resume, but it does kind of start there. Because if your resume is confusing, if your LinkedIn headline is vague, you're unlikely to even get an interview in the first place. But more importantly, if your interview answers drag on without getting to the point, people mentally check out and you lose the opportunity without even realizing it. This is why I always say, don't get defensive, don't badmouth past employers, don't just focus on what you've done and what you want to achieve. Focus on matching the interviewer. That simple piece of just being easy to deal with is one of the most underrated job search tactics you'll ever come across, and that alone can be the difference between landing the role or having to go back to the drawing board. So yeah, cognitive ease. In simple terms, be likable, be easy to deal with, and once you do that, once you make a strong, easy first impression, something called the halo effect kicks in. And this is where people start getting hired over candidates who are technically more qualified. Because the halo effect basically means this: if they like one thing about you, they start assuming they'll like everything else. Brilliant, right? So for example, if you communicate clearly, they assume you work clearly. If you seem confident, they assume you're competent. And if your online presence is strong, your perceived value goes through the roof. And this happens fast. Hiring managers make these unconscious judgments within the first 3 minutes, sometimes even before you walk into the room. Let me give you a real example. Now, I've had clients who have simply started showing up online following my personal branding strategies. And all of a sudden, recruiters were reaching out and treating them completely differently to before. Before, they told me they got hit with the same old screening questions they could only imagine being asked to complete rookies in their field. But after they built just a little bit of presence online, that all stopped because recruiters simply assumed they already knew everything and got right down to business with what was on offer. It was a completely different experience. They had exactly the same skills, the same experience, but the recruiters had a different impression. And the impression always wins because, again, hiring is emotional before it's logical. If you create a strong first impression and you carry that energy into the interview, the halo effect does half the work for you. The interviewer starts looking for reasons to believe you're the right fit, and that leads perfectly into the next principle, because once someone likes you, the next psychological trigger kicks in, which I'm simply going to label as likability. Because despite all of the efforts in the world to create fair and equal processes, there's always some level of unconscious bias that tends to creep in. Yes, we like to think hiring is objective, and I'm sure there's plenty of HR leaders who will insist that their process is different, but you can almost guarantee it isn't. Humans hire humans, and at the end of the day, people hire people they like. Not people with the best resume, not people with the fanciest way of saying things, people they would actually enjoy working with every day. And in the job search world, it's typically easier to talk yourself out of an opportunity than it is into one. And hey, I can tell you now that regardless of whether I was acting as a recruiter on behalf of clients or a hiring manager for my own business, I wanted the people I interviewed to get the job just as much as they did. Often more so. I was often busy, stressed, and had 100 things I needed to do. So if I called you in for an interview, I already seen something I liked and was hoping that you would be the one. But sometimes what would happen is that I would get on calls with candidates who spent the first 5 to 10 minutes complaining about recruiters, the job market, their last manager, and I'd think, you're clearly qualified, but are you going to be talking about me like this in 2 months' time? And instantly they became less hireable. On the other hand, I'd have candidates who showed up with a bit of personality and that was all that was needed. Suddenly I'd be thinking, I could work with this person, or my client is going to like this person. And that matters more than you think. Likability isn't about being overly friendly or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about matching the interviewer's energy, respecting their time, and showing that you're someone who can get on with things without loads of drama. So yeah, skills get you noticed, likability gets you hired, and that, my friends, is never likely to change. Certainly not until the whole system is controlled by heartless AI hiring teams. Now, the fourth principle is authority bias, and this one is a game changer once you understand it. Now, authority bias basically means this: people trust, respect, and choose the person who appears to be the expert, not always the actual expert, the perceived expert. You see this in everyday life. If a doctor walks into a room and tells you something, you listen. If a police officer gives you an instruction, you follow it. Not because you've analysed their qualifications in that moment, but because we're wired to trust authority figures. And the hiring process works the exact same way. Two people can have almost identical experience, but the one who looks and sounds like the authority, they get fast-tracked. Now, in today's world, you don't have to wait until the interview stage to give off this impression. You can do it way before that with your online presence. Now, this is why I talk about my EBC method so much. So entertaining content builds the audience, valuable content builds trust, and credible content builds authority. And with the right mix of each, you'll end up getting treated differently. Now, of course, once you've built that perception online, you need to carry it through to the interview stage as well. And you do that through 3 really simple behaviors. The first is clarity. So when they ask a question, don't waffle for 3 minutes and hope that you land somewhere good. Answer clearly, answer confidently, and answer in a way that shows you've solved this problem before. Now, second is structure. So you can use frameworks like the STAR format. And then number 3 is to simply showcase ownership. By this, I mean speaking in terms of what you've delivered. Not the team, not the company, but you. People with authority don't apologize for their achievements. They don't over-explain. They say what they did and the impact it made, simply and directly. Now, these tiny cues create a sense of confidence that interviewers pick up on instantly. And when that confidence is transferred from you to them, that you very quickly move to the next principle, which is the confirmation bias. Now, effectively, people look for evidence that supports the opinion they already have. So if the interviewer already sees you as an authority because of your LinkedIn presence, your experience, or even the way you introduced yourself, their brain now starts scanning for reasons to confirm that the first impression is correct. And the opposite is also true. So if they think that you lack confidence, or you seem unclear, or your energy feels off, their brain will start to look for reasons to back that belief instead. And this is why some interviews are effortless and others feel like you're constantly digging yourself out of a hole. Interviewers often make a decision about you in the first 60 to 90 seconds. The rest of the conversation is them subconsciously trying to justify that decision. So to ensure you're using this principle to your advantage, you first need to build that perceived value via your personal brand in advance. Walk in with confidence. Start strong. Reinforce your strengths with examples. Clarify questions before responding, and align your answers with the impression you want them to walk away with. And once their mind is leaning in your direction, direction, their own confirmation bias will help seal the deal and push them towards a yes. Now, the sixth principle is something I call the commitment principle, and this is the one that turns interviews into offers. Now, the commitment principle is simple. People are far more likely to follow through once they've verbally committed to something. And yes, you can use this ethically and professionally in interviews. Now, here's how it works. Throughout the interview, the hiring manager is forming an opinion about you, but they often don't say what they're thinking. So in most cases, you end up leaving the room hoping the interviewer felt like you were the right fit. But you know me, I don't like hope. Hope is not a strategy. Instead, you guide the interviewer into making a small verbal commitment, because once they say the words out loud, their brain wants to stay consistent with it. Now, if you can get them to give you a clear yes or an indication that you're going to be getting an offer or moving on to the next round, that's great. But at very least, you need to walk away from that interview knowing exactly what is going to happen next. And this is where my favorite interview technique comes in, the commitment lock. Right at the end of the interview, you lock in 3 things: the next steps, the exact time frame, and what you should do if that time frame is missed. So you could just say something like, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Before I go, could you walk me through the next steps and when I should expect an update? Then once they give you that timeline, you simply add, perfect. And if I don't hear anything by then, is it okay to give you a polite nudge? That's it. It gets you clarity, it gets them committed, and it removes the awkwardness of chasing because you've already agreed it's okay. Honestly, this one tiny little action can save you from days of second guessing and silence. So that's 6 psychological principles that shape almost every hiring decision, whether the interviewer realizes it or not. So cognitive ease, so basically being easy to deal with. The halo effect, understanding the importance of your first impressions. The likability principle, which essentially is the unconscious bias we all carry that leads us to be drawn to people who are just like us. Authority bias, confirmation bias, and then lastly, that commitment principle, where you lock in next steps and stay in control of the process. And look, if you want help applying these principles to your resume, your LinkedIn, your outreach, or your interviews, that's exactly what I teach inside my paid programs. I'll leave the link below if you want to take a look. But honestly, just using what I've shared today will put you ahead of most candidates. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.